they're at least 50 years, so they've seen the transformation that is happening, and they have got the business from their fathers or their ancestors. So that is.
So how many sarees did you buy from them?
Nothing, so there's already a lot. So, and Nachimuthu is already there in Chennai, so we always go. So not this time, but yeah, sometime later. And hello, sir.
Yeah, sir, maybe on you.
Sir, can you just repeat your second question? I'm sorry.
Balucha sir, can you hear us?
Yeah, what I wanted to ask you was, did you get any folklore or myths?
Yes, sir.
Those
Actually,
are very important, because if you want this to continue, then these folklore and myths become very, very important, very important in terms of cultural identity and looking forward to actually conserving it in future.
yes, sir. So there are folklores and myths, and they have already been documented well, because the site is so well studied that the ones that I kept hearing were the ones that were already documented. They are there in books that are prominently written about. And the most important, I would say, probably myth, or you can say call it a myth or something, that is the way the Sanctum Sanctorum had emerged, and it is called. They say that it is self-manifested. So I think if that goes into if that counts as folklore or myth, then.
Yeah, very much so. I think that Swayambhu concept is a very important thing for local people, right? So
and because the temple has a lot of history, not just that, but layers of history with so many kingdoms and so many periods adding to it, I think there are a lot more. But most of them have been documented and they have been published also.
Do we have any more questions from our guests on the chat? Okay, we have one from the audience.
Wonderful presentation, Varsha. It's very nice to see that you could stay there for such a long time and experience it. I just wanted to ask that like most of our heritage temples are swayed with the unjust and oppressive economics of past. Did you see any relationship between past and economics?
I have not studied particularly on that aspect, but temples do have that, and I would agree. But I have not studied that particular aspect, so I can't know.
Thank you very much, Varsha, for your presentation and wonderful answers, and also questions from the audience. We will now move on to our next two presenters. But before we introduce the presenter, and while they are setting up the stage, I would like to take this opportunity to welcome the evaluators for the next two students. It is my pleasure to welcome Dr. Anil Bharadwaj, who is an Indian Forest Service officer from 1985 Kerala cadre. He has retired as PCCF Chief Wildlife Warden and Head of Forest Force from Kerala Forest Department. He has a specialization in participatory management of protected areas from Castestars University, Bangkok, and he has 33 years of experience in the field of forestry, wildlife conservation, both as a practitioner as well as an academic profession. He has worked also as a faculty scientist. It was our pleasure to have him on deputation for 15 years at WII, and then as a senior professional fellow, where he has strengthened the Department of Eco-Development Planning and Participatory Management and Department of Protected Area Network. His major areas of interest are park-people interface, community livelihoods, biodiversity conservation, ecotourism, and protected areas and large landscape. He is also a member of IUCN SSC Sustainable Groups, World Commission on Protected Area and Biodiversity Conservation Society of Kerala. Thank you very much for joining us here and also being the evaluator of our students, sir. Our second evaluator for the students is Dr. Ambika Ayadurai. She is an assistant professor in IIT Gandhinagar. Her research focuses on the dynamics of human-animal relationship in the Indian Himalayas. She holds a dual master's in anthropology, environment and development from University College London, UK, and in wildlife science from WII. She also holds a PhD in anthropology from National University of Singapore, where her thesis revolved around politics of wildlife conservation in the borderlands of Arunachal Pradesh. Dr. Ambika's ongoing and long-term research aims are to understand people-nature relationships and how local and global forces shape their relations, leading to collaborations and conflict among different groups. Dr. Ayadurai, thank you very much for joining us through Zoom. It is a pleasure to have you as the evaluator for our students. I also welcome Dr. Kamar Qureshi, who has joined us over Zoom, and he is also OPI of our students. Thank you very much, sir, for joining us remotely. Thank you, Vishnu, Dr. Ramesh, and rest of the researchers who have recently joined us here. Now, Abhishek is all set to present, and his dissertation topic is relocation and resilience, a case study from Sariska Tiger Reserve. Over to you, Abhishek. You have 20 minutes to present.
Can you hear me? Good morning everyone, my name is Abhishek. Today I am presenting my thesis dissertation titled Relocation and Resilience, a case study from Sariska Tiger Reserve. Before we move into the study, I just want to give a brief idea of the concept of protected area came into existence with the idea of conserving biodiversity and ecosystem, also providing equitable benefits of nature to people, as well as providing global solutions to the nature-based solutions to the global problems. However, human existence in protected areas were there even before the word protected area came into existence. And with increasing time, this human existence increased, and this turned into increasing biomass extraction and increasing dependency on natural resources. This later on created a conflicting issue between the protected area managers as well as the communities living inside these protected areas. So relocation was seen as a solution to this problem, and to create inviolate spaces inside the protected areas to provide species movement inside protected areas, as well as conserving the ecosystem and the landscape. My study, I am checking the ground reality of the implementation of relocation movement in Sariska Tiger Reserve. So there are earlier studies being done regarding relocation and about the need of relocation, which have separated the two school of thoughts. One concerning the ecology, and also the other one is about talking about the social welfare of the people. Why I have chosen to work on Sariska Tiger Reserve? Because Sariska Tiger Reserve has seen extinction of tigers in 2005. Later on, the issue, the tigers were reintroduced in 2008. One of the biggest reasons for the tigers extinction was seen as the poaching of tigers and hunting activities inside the tiger reserve. And thereafter, relocation was started with full force in 2008, and Sariska, according to the Forest Department, they have already relocated 2 successful villages in the area. Sariska Tiger Reserve lies in the eastern part of India, in the western part of India, in the eastern part of Rajasthan state and Alwar district. This is my study site, where you can see the four villages inside are the villages which are to be relocated villages for the future projects, and the site outside the Bardot, Roon and Roon Mazkur are the relocated villages. Moving on to the brief history about the relocation in the Sariska. So Sariska's relocation history has started long back, and in 1966 and 67, Slokha and Kaligati villages were firstly relocated from the Tiger Reserve. Later on, Roon Bandipur and Roon Dulba were two reserve forest land which were used for relocation in 1976. And in 77, 35 families from Karankawas and 69 families from Teraska were relocated. Later on, from 2008 and 2013, Kankwadi, Devri, Bagani, Umri, Rotkela are the few successful relocated villages inside Sariska Tiger Reserve. And currently, Sariska is planning to relocate Lilunda, Kundalga, Rekhamala, which are the future projects. So before I move into my study, I just want to give a brief idea about the package of relocation. So the package of relocation is divided into two options. The first option gives beneficiary an amount of 10 lakhs, which have recently increased from 10 lakh to 15 lakh in April. And the second option provides 6 bighas of land plus 2.5 lakh for the household construction. However, the age should be at least, the beneficiary can either opt for one option out of the two options, and the minimum age should be 18 during the relocation survey, and the daughters do not get the relocation package. However, widows are eligible for the package. Now, where are they relocated? So the relocation site is decided by the forest department, and survey for the relocation package is done by the local administration department, including Tehsildar as well as Patwari. And pre-planned meetings are also done, as well as the involvement of social organization or NGO can be taken to get people agree for the relocation. People's consent is very necessary before any relocation, and the site is first showed to each family before relocation. So I have done a sample of 86 households in the relocated sites of Bardot, Roon and Roon Mazkur, and 96 households in the to be relocated sites which are still inside the Sariska Tiger Reserve, the Haripura, Traska, Kankwadi and Lilunda village. Moving on to my objective, my first objective of the study is to understand the perception of communities and forest department towards relocation. Under this objective, I am asking two questions. What is the perception of forest authorities towards relocation, and what is the how does the community perceive the process of relocation? To get answers of the objective, I have done stratified random sampling and semi-structured interviews. Also, questionnaire survey was done, and to infer the results, I have done content analysis. So this is a set of questions which I have asked to the forest department. The set of the questions include the rationale for relocation, the need for the relocation, and why and how it is helping the communities, and how does the process of the relocating villages have started. So I have done 8 surveys in forest department, including the DFO, range forest officer, forest guard, as well as forest guard. So the basic points which have come out in the interview and questionnaire analysis was necessity of relocation for forests and communities was agreed by everyone in the forest department, and everyone has answered that the relocation has actually helped not only the movement of the wildlife inside the protected area, but also it has seen growth in vegetation, as well as communities are also improving because they are also getting more resources outside. Similarly, there were a few problems which identified by the forest department, as the people in the to be relocated sites which are still inside are well connected with the people outside, and they are well aware of the problems faced by the people outside. So that is why they are constantly talking, and they are well aware that this kind of problems can happen to them in future. So they want prior solutions to that problem, which is a big issue in front of the forest department. And the survey for relocation package is another issue in case of Sariska Tiger Reserve, because the survey conducted in Sariska Tiger Reserve was in 2011, and that survey is still considered for the relocation package in the current going projects, and that survey is still excluding a large number of population which is above 18 after 2011. That is why there is a conflict of interest between the communities and the forest department. Also, land quality is another issue because the proposed relocation sites are currently Kanpura Lodge and Tijara Road, which have two different types of quality of land. So the land quality is very different, and people are not willing to relocate because they have issues that one person is getting good quality of land here and the other person is not getting the same quality of the land. So this is a big issue in front of the forest department. Moving on to the perception of the communities inside STR. I have done household surveys of Kraska, Kankawadi, Haripura and Yellonar village. So the major points which have come out is the lack of contentment in the communities. The communities are not satisfied with the process of relocation, and mostly they have said that the relocation proposed sites are two different sites, and the infrastructure accessibility as well as the land quality in the sites is very different, as well as the procedure of relocation is very biased towards people who have close connections with the forest department, and that is why the people who have close connection are getting good quality of land, and also people from outside are making money in the relocation projects. One interesting fact in this procedure of relocation which came out in the relocated sites of Bardo Zone, during my interview, 13 families have pointed out that they are losing 1 bighah of the land because the land was falsely allocated to them by forest department that was earlier in the name of Indian Oil Company in 1962, which has created an issue amongst the 13 family, and they are losing their 1 bighah of the land. Similarly, these kind of issues are creating fear amongst the communities who are still inside the protected areas. However, they have also pointed out a bit positive aspects such as the need of education for their kids that will be more accessible if they move outside, and they will get better access to infrastructure as well. So this graph here clearly shows that 57% of people wanted to relocate if they get proper facilities outside. And this graph here shows that the concerns raised by people are mostly education, infrastructure and road, and these concerns consist of 70% of their major concerns. Moving on to my second objective is to understand community resilience in the context of the relocation. The research question I have asked under it, how resilient are the communities to the effect of relocation? And methods followed in this question, in this objective is semi-structured interviews, questionnaire surveys, stratified random sampling, and t-test was done to understand the livestock numbers, to see the variance of livestock numbers and expenses and income from the livestock numbers. So before we go on into the objective, I want to give a brief idea about the community resilience, which is defined in 3 parts: the process definition, the absence of adverse definition, the range of attributes definition. So the process definition in earlier literature talks about the ongoing process and change of a community in any disaster situation. And absence of adverse effects definition talks about the ability of a community to maintain the stable functioning in any crisis situation. And similarly, the range of attributes definition talks about the ability of a community to the response related ability of a community after a crisis situation. So in my study, I am looking relocation as a disaster situation, and their ability to respond and strengthen themselves after this relocation is seen as community resilience in my study. So I have pointed out two types of, I have divided community resilience in 2 different types of measurables: the non-abstract measurables and the abstract measurables. The abstract measurables talks about dependency on natural resources, adaptive livelihood options, community groups and committees for their decision making, education, material assets and accessibility to infrastructure, their power structure, their social trust and collective efficacy, and their healthcare system in the village. Moving on to the non-abstract measurables, I have pointed out we have pointed out non-abstract measurables as traditional knowledge structure, activity pattern and leisure time, identity and perception, and their relationship with nature. Moving on to the results of natural resource dependency, this graph here clearly shows that the average livestock population in the relocated villages have declined and villages who are still inside have large average livestock population as compared to the relocated villages. Moving on to this box plot here shows the variance in the numbers of livestock, and however the next graph here shows that the expenses on the livestock have actually increased after relocation, and relocated villages are expending more on their livestock as compared to the villages who are still inside. However, variance income per livestock has increased with relocated villages. Moving on to the fuelwood dependency, here this graph shows that the people inside are dependent on Anogenesis, Pendula, Butia, Monosperma, Boswellia serrata and Acacia luteofolia for their fuelwood consumption. However, outside we see that 60 point some percentage are actually dependent on agricultural waste, and or either they are buying fuelwood as compared to the people who are still inside. So from this we can infer that the number of livestock have decreased in relocated villages due to the expenses outside, increase in expenses outside. However, fuelwood dependency have increased in relocated villages due to less availability of forest products. So this shows that the agricultural waste, adoption of agricultural waste and buying fuelwood shows the adaptive techniques of communities to counter the problem of fuelwood resources. Moving on to the adaptive livelihood options, this graph here shows the categories of different types of livelihood options available in the landscape. Agriculture, livestock rearing and wage labor are the three major livestock performed or opted by the people in the landscape. And this graph here shows the difference between the number of livelihood strategies per household has occupied in the area. This here clearly shows that the villages inside Sarista are still limited to one or two livelihood strategies. However, people after relocation have got either 2, 3 and some households have also gone for 4 livelihood options. From this we can infer that the categories of livelihood options were also found similar in all the sites, but from this we can infer that these communities are not the traditional tribal communities as compared to central India or northeast India. However, the result, this also exposes them to the livelihood options outside, which have helped them in adopting more livelihood options when they are relocated, and include access to the resources was another main reason which helped them in improving their livelihood strategies. Moving on to the education, this graph here clearly shows that the number of school-going children, the percentage number of school-going children have also increased after relocation, and the same number of people when they were inside, there were only 35% were going to the school. However, after moving outside, this number has turned up to 51. And on the other hand, inside the number has actually declined from 29% to 44%. Similarly, education level of respondents have also increased after relocation. And the uneducated population inside are in large number as compared to the relocated villages. This graph here shows the distance to education infrastructure of primary, secondary as well as Anganwadi center. And this shows that the relocated villages here have an average distance of median distance of 4 kilometers as compared to the villages who are still inside, which lies between 6 to 15 kilometers. From this we can infer that the distance to education infrastructure have reduced in relocated sites. As a result, number of individuals have also increased in the same. Moving on to the material assets and infrastructure facilities, this graph here clearly shows that the number of material assets have also increased in the relocated sites, except solar battery, which was given to them by some local NGO in the villages inside. Other numbers, for example, motorbike, TV, radios have also increased in relocated villages. Similarly, this graph here shows the average distance to infrastructure facilities, which shows that the average distance have also reduced in the relocated villages for the basic infrastructure facilities they require, for example, hospital, food market, milk dairy, post office, pharmacies, etc. From this we can infer that the result shows that the facilities are in now close proximities and this further has helped communities in adapting new livelihood options. Moving on to the social trust and collective efficacy, this graph here shows that the social trust among the villagers have actually declined in the relocated villages. Only 53% of villagers have trust among their fellow villagers. However, on the other hand, villagers inside are 91% connected to them, to each other. And out of these 53% in relocated villages, only 80% of them are only connected with their blood relatives or family members. However, on the other hand, in 2B relocated villages, almost everyone is connected with in the village, which shows that social trust has become weaker because of the large distance between the households after relocation, and villagers inside are more collective socially as compared to the people outside due to their close proximity of houses to each other. Moving on to the other measurables, the community groups and decision making, there is no existence of